Welcome back. We're here for playoffs now in the LCK on the Monte and Wolf Show. I'm Monte. This is Mr.
I'm Wolf.
Schröder.
Yeah.
Shout out to Atan, who did an amazing job on our logo with the mirror of Monte and Wolf. He figured out that he could actually make that a mirror, which is of our names, which is very, very cool. The show name may be uncreative, but the way that it's presented, quite creative.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So there's a ton of stuff that happened this week. Some extremely unexpected results. So I'm going to list a bunch of things, and I'll let you pick where to start, Wolf.
Okay.
Faker's back. So that's number one. We saw KT Rolster's challenger team eliminate Live Sandbox from playoffs. DRX made a very unlikely playoff run. It was Brover, but then Brion spoiled Gen.G's chances of actually taking first place within the LCK in the regular split. Hanwha Life completely clapped Dplus. A lot of these things are surprises. So which surprise box would you like to open first?
I guess we could start with like talking about DRX and Bro, because it's probably like one of the shorter conversations we'll have here. But I'm a little bit, let's just say like Bro disappointed me one last time by losing to DRX 2-0 in a series that could have theoretically been very winnable for them. And DRX had like the pretty easy schedule considering we were, at least I wasn't. I was pretty low on Bro going into this week after what we saw from them last week in their really important matches. They just could not win, couldn't beat Live Sandbox, couldn't clutch it out against Nongshim. Two series they should have won. So I thought, okay, well, they're probably just going to get 4-0'd this week. And after the DRX series, I was like, all right, that's it. DRX is probably going to playoffs. There's no way Kwangdong Freaks beats DRX. And then Bro beat Gen.G, which was just I mean, it was a pretty hype series. Like Umpty played extremely well. His Lilia game was actually so fun to watch, and he was just flying around the rift. He went for a crown build as well, and then still did tons of damage. And Gen.G just didn't respect that Bro showed up, and
they kind of inted. Let's be fair. They kind of inted. Chovy kind of inted on Jace. A little bit. Peanut kind of inted a little bit on Rumble. Doran definitely inted in some of those team fights.
Well, Peanut played Rumble Jace without Maokai, which I mean you can do it, but there's no way to lock anybody down for the equalizer. They didn't really have great engage, and when you fall behind with that type of composition, like the Jace and the Rumble are just sitting ducks to be picked off, and then in the second game, obviously the Lilia for Umpty was pretty good. The Kog'Maw also ended up being pretty interesting.
They stole the Braun Kog'Maw tech, the dark tech from G2, so that was fun to watch.
Yeah, so they clearly got some influence there from other regions, and I thought the drafting was a little bit disrespectful, especially in the first game for Gen.G. But it's very clear that like this is a game that to me basically proves that Bro have stage fright issues and like not okay, that's not the right word for this. They have like pressure issues. Like the more important the match is for them, the less they're gonna rise to the occasion and perform. And on the other side, like if the match doesn't matter, if they're not expected to win it, like so many of the upsets they've gotten over the last few years, then they actually will just have fun and pop off and like go and like Umpty does this little like thing where he points at his jersey in front of the crowd. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, but what about like beating the really easy teams you should have beaten last week or beating DRX earlier this week? Like, why couldn't you do those? You can crush Gen.G. And to be fair, it was not Gen.G at their top form. I do agree with you, and I think there was some inting to be discussed, but
there was definitely some happy gaming from Gen.G.
Yeah. It became sad gaming, I'd say, at the end, where they like ultimately didn't. They basically were like, okay, well, I guess if KT win, we like if they won KT, if they won, also they would have gotten first place. So ultimately, like even if Gen.G won this, they would not have gotten first place based on the results of the KT Live Sandbox series.
Yep.
But after losing this, they were like, well, it doesn't matter at all. And so KT got to play their challengers team, but I guess we can, unless you want to talk about this any further, we could transition into talking about that.
I think it would have depended on the map score, because it was possible, I think, maybe not after losing the first game, but it was possible before this series started that if Gen.G goes, 2-0 here and KT goes 0-2, that they would have been tied, I guess, at 27 map
Yeah,
differential.
so I also was under the understanding until earlier this week that if they were tied, there was going to be a tiebreaker because KT lost the first series to Gen.G, but won the second one. But apparently, because they won a game in the first one, it was considered in the head-to-head that they had like more games. So therefore, they would have just won the head-to-head, which I think is a new rule they might have added this
I think
year.
that's a good rule, honestly,
Yeah,
because
just it,
basically in the two best of three series, KT was 3-2
yeah,
is combined.
yeah.
So I think that's a good rule, honestly.
I don't know if it used to always be like that, but it's just a good way to kill the tiebreaker, which is kind of anti-hype and sad, but it's also just like it settles the debate and saves time and makes teams not have to like show up on days where they're not playing, but which Gen.G would have had to do if they were going to be potentially tying KT. They have to like watch and see if KT lost, and
Well,
then
it would also be kind of unfair to KT because they would have had to play two matches on the same day, and
yep,
Gen.G could have prepared for them for 24 hours. So, I mean, I'd rather just not have the tiebreaker or have the tiebreaker on a different day because it's almost like punishing KT for that scenario.
yep, exactly. So I think it's overall, while somewhat anti-hype, definitely a good thing. So KT this week they had their series against Nongshim, which they did drop a game in. That was some happy gaming KT, which has been more of a thing recently. They definitely are having a lot more fun. The Vayne game comes to
Yes, the
mind,
Vayne game
obviously.
against T1 and game 2. Yes.
Yeah. Uh, we'll see what happens with that in playoffs. I don't know if we'll see any of that in playoffs, but definitely happy gaming a little bit. But Nongshim definitely looking really good in their final week. Like, keep in mind that Nongshim also played a very close series against Dplus. Even though Dplus did end up winning it 2-0, like Nongshim actually kept that series pretty competitive. Both of those games were not a stomp for Dplus by any means. So Nongshim having a pretty good week, even though ultimately they couldn't decide their or change their fate for playoffs. And then KT goes into the series against Live Sandbox, where DRX already has the advantage. So Live Sandbox has to win the series in order to go to playoffs. No one's expecting this. This is why going into this week, everyone's like, oh, I guess DRX is going to playoffs. They have much easier opponents. And then game one, stock standard KT win the first game. There was a little back and forth, but it was overall a pretty straightforward game. KT win. And I wasn't casting, right? I had to do Pog State recording that night. So I was like, well,
Yes, the second best LCK podcast. Yeah, I know
yeah,
that one.
exactly. So so I was like, all right, I got to get ready and go in. So I'm like getting, changed and getting ready to go to do my recording. And then I see the casters on the analyst desk are like, and also KT will be playing their challengers team in game 2. And I'm like, do I stay actually, or do I go to Lol Park and like sit
so
around for two more
so
games?
tell me, Wolf, as somebody who hasn't been watching Challengers and you cast it, how good is their Challenger team?
So they're currently they finished 5th place in regular season, if I'm not mistaken. KT's Challengers team, and in spring I actually thought they could have won the whole thing. I thought they were definitely a top 2 team for most of the season in spring, and then they ended up dropping down and didn't have the greatest playoffs. But they make some really weird decisions with their roster. Like, I don't really know what KT's org wants to use this Challengers team for, because when they had 2 subs or 2 supports and 2 tops, they like would play like one each game, like every series, no matter what, regardless of opponent. Like, easy opponent, just gonna sub them out in game 2, no matter what. Really tough opponent, really important game. We won game 1, and it's definitely the better player, but we're gonna sub them out and put the other player in game 2. They do weird stuff like that. But their mid laner, Feisty, or Feisty as he's called in Korea, he is, I think, the best player on the team. I think he is, to me, one of the best mids in Challengers, and he ended up getting, spoilers, in the KT win, the MVP in that final game of the series. And I think that they were once, like I said, a top 2 team in Challengers. They've been very inconsistent of late and have dropped down to 5th. And I don't know what it is. I think the coaching staff uses this team in such a weird way where they're constantly subbing players in and out and trying to figure out, I guess, the future of this roster, or maybe if they want to use this roster for the future of LCK. But I did not. It's not the team that you would expect is better than Live Sandbox, to put it like in a more plain way. I expected Liv Sandbox should be able to crush this team because they have way more experience. They have the stronger roster. Feisty might be the best player on the team, but he's going up against Closer, who has had his ups and downs. But I would say Closer's experience and like his strength in this meta should give him the advantage there. You also have Hype, who's a really strong AD carry in the bottom lane. But, you know, he's up against Teddy. There are just things where you're like, okay, really cool player who's pretty good, but also like not amazing, versus Liv Sandbox, who are playing for a lot, and the Challengers team has like nothing to lose, right? And this is not like, I think a lot of people look at LCK Challengers like it's Overwatch contenders or something, where it's like, oh, all these new talent are coming up and they just smash all the old ones. Like every team is trying to get these players and they come in and they're just automatically the best. Like Dplus KIA's Challengers team goes to LCK, they win the whole thing. It's like Runaway or something like that. Like I think a lot of Overwatch fans who watch both games have like kind of tried to like hype these teams up like that. I'm like, no, it's not like that actually. It's not like that at all. And yet, the team came in and smashed Liv Sandbox. It wasn't close.
Do you think KT planned for this once Gen.G lost and they were confident that, you know, they were going to be able to pull out this win and be guaranteed the first seed?
So I talked to Rapid Star, and he basically alluded to that, like they had planned this based on the guarantee of first place. And then Hirai did an interview, like a press conference interview, end of season interview, where he said that like the plan was if we win game one, put the Challengers guys in, because they were all there, right? Like they definitely planned this because they didn't like call him and go like, yo, get in the van, like hurry up, we only got a few minutes before game two starts. Like they were all there. And then Hirai basically said like we wanted to put him in, give him some additional experience. They're playing today in the second series for playoffs as well in Challengers a little bit later on. Against Hanwha Life, I believe. And so here I was basically, we're put them in, get some experience. When they lose, we're going to have like the players say something in their post-game interview, like BD's going to be like, who hit my little bros? And then they came into game 3, then Aiming is going to get his kill record, because Aiming was competing for like most kills in a split or something like that. And he didn't get it because he didn't play in game 2. It was very close. And I was told about this afterwards, so I don't actually know what the numbers were or anything like that, but a lot of fans were upset because Aiming didn't get his record. BDD was at 1,999 kills after game 1. Didn't get 2,000 kills today. So a lot of stuff like that went on.
Why are people mad? Why are people mad? Aiming, didn't he go like, he didn't even get kills in the first game of the series, right? I think he was like, didn't he get 0 kills?
Let me check. I know that BDD in fact got 7 kills, and I think he was at 1,992, which is why I was saying he was one away from the 2,000. I can look at Aiming's match history really quick here. 0, 2, and 13 on the Tristana, which was
exactly. Funny. He had every opportunity.
Yeah,
he had every opportunity. Wolf, I don't feel bad for him. Also,
oh, go ahead.
No, he also had, you know, I don't know, an entire season to get those kills. So are we really angry here? Does Aiming need the record for kills? Is this a thing that needs to happen, Wolf?
I mean, if I were Aiming, I'd be a little bit upset, but if I were Aiming, I'd probably be like, yeah, it's cool. Like we'll do it in game 3, because the Challengers team's probably not gonna do it, right? So my understanding of why a lot of Korean fans are upset is because, and I looked at this and like,
because they get upset about everything. Is that what you're gonna say?
Well, I mean, there is a little bit of that. But I saw a lot of people were upset about Hirai's interview, where, you know, he was just saying like, yeah, we'll have him come in and then like they'll lose and then we'll win him in game 3 and get those records. But people seemed pretty upset because the Sandbox wasn't aware of this, obviously, and for DRX, like it was to some people a little bit disrespectful that KT would just like kind of mess around in a series that could, you know, eliminate DRX or playoffs. Now, I totally understand the idea that obviously KT earned the right to do this
mentality. Exactly.
I hate the right mentality to do this. Now, here's my take, because my take is like KT could absolutely do this. It's not against the rules. Although a lot of conversation, I think, after this has been had about like whether or not you should be able to sub your entire Challengers team in on a whim without the other team having any idea whether those players are playing or not, and then they basically have a 10-man roster and a best of 3, which is not how the system is intended to be used. So a lot of people are having a discussion about that, but it's not against the rules. It's totally fine. KT absolutely can do this, and the players seemed really hyped. They had a great time. The KT coaching staff, as well as like their main like support staff and the head of the team, were all there. They're all like high five and going crazy when KT won, the Challengers team won. But is it a little disrespectful? I would say yeah. So like if you want to think about it that way, like did they respect like both DRX and Live Sandbox in this series? Absolutely not. Because for Live Sandbox, there's no winning here. If you beat the Challengers team and then lose in the third game, like everyone just laughs at you. But if you lose to the Challengers teams, you're humiliated, right? And I think the players did not play well. And if you've ever done any sort of competition, like you know that like yes, of course, like we are Live Sandbox, we should be able to beat this, but there's always that mental edge that you're gonna have against you when this Challengers team is like, we're here to mess around, and basically the coach told us like you're definitely not even gonna win this. Just go in and give it your best. And the other team is literally playing for their lives. So like I think there's a little bit of an edge there. So was it like cool of KT to do it? No, but they don't have to actually say like they don't have to do the righteous thing or the honorable thing because they've earned that right because they earned first place. And
Why
Bro
would
earned
you
first place.
why would you give your opponents more information right before playoffs if you have the opportunity to not show more gameplay from your first team? It is a reasonable strategic decision from KT. Don't give your opponents extra film to study, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, they kind of said they were going to play in game 3 anyways, but if they win, right? Like that's the thing. I think a lot of people considered it kind of like not like showboating, but just kind of like, oh, okay, like our challengers team is better than this team even, so we're gonna put them in. And I don't think that's really the attitude that KT was looking for at all. But from a strategic perspective, you could absolutely use it that way. I don't think that was the plan at all, based on what Rapid Star told me and what Hirai said in that interview. It was just kind of like, let's give these guys a shot at seeing if they can beat Live Sandbox, let them play on the stage in front of in front of the LCK
I mean, it's
crowd.
also valuable information for KT on perhaps players for next year, because remember, we were talking last week about the fact that most of the KT players, including Keen, Aiming, all these guys, I think except for BDD is on a contract until 2025 or 2024. But most of these guys are not going to be potentially on this team next year. And so don't you want to give them some stage experience? Maybe at least get a little information on how they react to being on the big stage, to being placed into the pressure environment of the LCK. I think there are a lot of reasons why you would want to do this. And so if you are evaluating your challenger team, because you know that the vast majority of your player contracts are going to be expiring, then I think it's a totally good decision in order to do this. And as you pointed out, I hate when people say this, Wolf, but when they complain, but you earned your right to do this. And like, it's not KT's fault that these other dumbass teams couldn't win enough games to lock their playoff slots before the last day of the tournament. You had 18 chances to win games, to win series within LCK. It's not KT's fault that you couldn't pull it off, right? Like, fuck everybody else. KT can do what they want. And I just looked it up. Keen, Cuz, Aiming, and the Hens are free agents at the end of this season.
Yeah, only BDD.
So why wouldn't you just go ahead and test these players? See what you have. I think it's completely reasonable.
With the new rules and stuff that are coming in next year, these players might decide they don't even want to stay in the region. So you never know what's going to happen. Like
and here's another thing for you, Wolf. All the players on that stage are contracted through the end of next year to KT. All the challenger players who played.
Yeah. So, I mean, next year we will definitely have an interesting conversation about next year at some point on this show, either during the Stove League or before it. But after Worlds and towards the end of this year, it's going to get wild in the off season. And I think a lot of teams that are really good right now, like KT, for example, you won't see this roster together next year, and you won't necessarily see all, if not even necessarily a majority of these players even in the region. So, in my opinion, but we'll talk about that more later.
What the fuck is Stove League?
Stove League is a term that came out during like KBO's off season, I believe, the Korean Baseball League, and It is basically like everything heats up is what I was told. Like I don't even know 100% where this term stove
What?
comes from, but everything heats up during the off season and everything's like getting boiled, and then we find out where everyone's going, where all the players are going. It got that term got pushed into the LCK off season. Everyone calls it Stove League.
But what you mean is
It's
off
been called like
season.
Stove League for years. I don't know. Like I think it was even called that when you were here.
It was not.
I
It
mean,
was
maybe not by
not.
the English casters, but everybody calls it Stove League colloquially. I don't know.
What the fuck is Stove League? What you mean
Stove
is
League.
the off season.
Yeah. Well, like the off season like Stove League contextualizes it in terms of like player movement. If you just say the off season, then like
Okay, but
that's
English
that's a
speakers
wider
know that
term.
as the off season, like off season drama or the off season shakeup, right?
Sure.
Stove League makes it sound like there's an actual competition happening, like there is a league. I don't know what to tell you. Like,
I mean,
what the fuck is
there is an
Stove
actual
League?
competition going on. It's just not it's just kind of, under the table, and some phone calls are made to certain agents and stuff like that. Anyway, so I think personally, again, KT can do this, and it's within the rights of the rules and stuff like that. It made a lot of people upset. I think the rules will be reviewed. I don't know if this
Oh, those
should
rules are terrible, by the way. You shouldn't be able to do that.
it should not be, in my opinion, allowed for a team to just be like, actually, in the back room, I have my whole challengers team. I guess you have to prepare for two teams. And the way that they drafted, for example, like Hambach, who's a really good, we didn't talk about him earlier when we were talking about the challengers team. Hambach is a really good jungle player and was my front runner for MVP of the spring season for a lot of the season. He is a really good Vi player. They didn't target his Vi. They let Feisty have his Azir. Like they clearly didn't know or were prepared in any way for this roster, right? And like that's just not fair that a team can have a 10-man roster that you can't really necessarily know about or plan for, especially considering they're playing tomorrow. Like, how could Live Sandbox in any reasonable way expect that this team is going to be playing strategically? I think it's a bit weird. So,
I fucking love when people like just manipulate rules like this. I love it.
well, I mean, this is the cool thing is like this rule may be changed because of this.
Yeah.
So history could be made. But anyway, was it like the nicest and coolest thing to do ever? No. Were the Live Sandbox players visibly upset? Yes. Was DRX extremely stressed out? No, 100%. But ultimately, if you're first place and you're following the rules, and it's all within the sphere of the competition. But like, it's not like they all went in and played like troll champs and were like just totally like trying to lose on purpose, basically, because it doesn't matter. It wasn't like that. It was just giving these guys some experience. And I think for the players, ultimately, it was really valuable. I saw the players walk through Lol Park, and they all seemed super happy, super excited to beat Live Sandbox. I mean, obviously, the atmosphere on the other side for Live Sandbox was the complete opposite, but everyone is running around getting high fives from the KT staff and just like high fiving each other and being like, oh, the Emperor's Divide. And, they're just like talking about the game. They're all so young. So I'm happy for them in that regard.
Me too. Good old drama in the last week of competition. So, Wolf, where's your head at? Are you thinking that Faker's back and this display of dominance against Live Sandbox, and what, Nongshim?
Yeah. Wait, no, it was Guangdong.
Kwangdong, sorry.
Even worse.
Even worse. Kwangdong. When we got to see
Guangdong, by the way, finished
the
2 and
Bulldog
16.
Zareth.
2 and 16 the second round. They are like the 5th team in LCK history to go lossless in a round robin.
Shout out to them starting 2-0 to start the summer, and then going 2 and 16 from that point forward. It was a very brief 1 week bright spot for the Guangdong Freaks.
So I think for KT, or rather for T1, the team looks much better. Obviously, caliber of opponent fairly weak this week, and they did drop a game to Live Sandbox, who did just lose to KT's challengers team. So like we have to add the caveats here. But Baker looked happy. He was playing Zareth. The coordination was good. They were decisive on team fights, and I do think there's hope that this roster can continue to level up, especially if Faker continues to recover during this time during playoffs. It could be the opposite, to where he pushes himself too hard and actually really struggles in playoffs because his condition worsens over playing these best of fives. That's really difficult to predict because I don't really know the exact details of his current condition, although he has, Tom and everybody in these press conferences have alluded to, he has recovered significantly, but he isn't fully recovered, but he feels comfortable to play. That's kind of like what we know. And I don't know if that means that's going to get better even if he plays or if it's going to get worse. Like that much I can't tell you guys. I
So,
can't predict.
what happens in the NFL, right, is that when you get to the playoffs and everyone's injured by the time the playoffs roll around, right? You just inject people with enormous amounts of painkillers so you can make it through the playoffs, right? Everything be damned. Now, I'm not saying T1 is injecting Faker with enormous amounts of painkillers, but I am saying that, during these times, players and teams will go to great lengths in order to make sure that they can still compete. So get there to the off season where then they can rest and recover from their injuries.
Yeah. And I mean, the offseason may be a ways away if T1 ends up going through the Worlds qualifiers as well. But there's a little bit of an extra buffer because of Asia games before Worlds, and even though Faker's on that roster, I don't expect he will be playing, so he'll have some time to recover there, at least before Worlds, if T1 make Worlds, which is another conversation we'll be having. But let's talk about Damwon really quick before we contextualize like what this means, I think, because T1 and Damwon will face off in the first round of playoffs.
Excuse me, D+.
Sorry. We connect to plus D. I still say Damwon to this day for some reason.
I don't know why they called themselves D+. It's truly horrible, but here we are.
Like we've been talking a lot about Damwon Gaming's history recently, so like I keep thinking, oh yeah, Damwon, and then I'm like, well, it's not. But then if you say, oh yeah, D+ when they won Worlds, I'm like, no, actually it was Damwon back then. It was not D+. So I hate it. Please don't do this, teams.
And they also just changed their logo to the horrible O. Have you seen the memes, Wolf, with like the hands opening up the O?
No, but I can imagine what it means.
There are these hands that are like pulling from the outside. It's reminiscent of some old internet videos that are notorious,
Yeah, it sounds that way. Sounds reminiscent of what happened with D+ versus Hanwha. Is that was not a close series at all. And Hanwha, they got exposed by Gen.G because Grizzly got exposed by Peanut in a big way in that series. And that was like there wasn't even a conversation to be had about whether Viper or Pays is better in this game because it just wasn't a fair game where Peanut got massively outclassed his opposition and counter jungled, set up vertical jungling that Grizzly couldn't match and just destroyed him. But then when D+ played against Hanwha, Showmaker got outclassed by Zeka, and Zeka just destroyed Showmaker. And the mental of D+ seems a little bit weak right now. Deft is trying his best to carry. Like he's the only one on this team who seems to actually be playing very well. Kana to a certain extent. Like Deft and Kana look pretty clean, but when you look at how D+ looks with Showmaker when he is off, Canyon then can't do anything. He doesn't make the same impact. He needs that mid prio. And if he doesn't have it and Showmaker's getting solo killed and having to flash at like level 3, then Canyon
I never saw
absent.
what happened in that Jace game that caused him to have to flash like 3 minutes.
He just went for like he went forward and got charmed and like ate a orb of deception, I think, and then he just got pushed by Zeka again, and Zeka like autoed him a few more times, and then he was like, I think his Q was like about to come back up, and then he walked towards Showmaker, and Showmaker was like at maybe 1/5 health, and then he just like flashed because he was like, I'm gonna get Q'd and die, because like the positioning is, when you put orb out, like if you're like at the exact point in which it's gonna like come back, it's really hard to avoid like getting hit by it twice, and like the spacing looked kind of like that. That's what I remember anyways from that game. As a flash because it looked like Zeka was probably just going to Q him and then flash kill him. So then his flash was down. He got hit by another charm and then died. And he went for the Serrated Dirk first instead of going for Merc Treads first, which is like, it's not uncommon, but when you're losing lane, it's pretty hard to go Dirk first because if you keep getting hit by charms, like you're going to die. And he kept getting hit by charms.
Still don't have flash, it turns out.
Yeah, so anyway, he did not have a great series. I think D+ overall seemed a little bit shaky, and that's why they're, we talked to the coaching staff, Atlas and I did directly, and they told us that the reason why they were playing Bible is because they want to have a shot calling voice on the team. I see people all the time in comments saying like, I don't know why the casters say that like Bible is a good shot caller. There's no proof of this. Well, Dplus have literally told us that they think he's a more important voice than Kellen. But we also know his laning phase is much worse than Kellen's.
And he just runs it in lane like we saw in the second game of the series.
So that this is a huge problem for Dplus. They like in Deft, I feel like when Deft is shot calling, because it's very clearly Deft, right? When he's shot calling, his positioning isn't as good. When Bible's in, Deft looks better outside of lane and in team fights, but if the team is behind, doesn't matter how good Deft looks. He looks like Teddy on Live Sandbox, where he's like, I'm trying, but I don't know. I don't have a team. And I don't actually at this moment in time, like in conclusion, based on how this team looks very downtrodden. We don't know if they're gonna play Kellen or not. I hope so, honestly. I really hope they play Kellen because you don't get the shot call if you're 4,000 gold down at 20 minutes.
I agree with that.
So like if I was the greatest shot caller in the world, why would they ever play me? I mean, like
I don't know. Beryl made playoffs again. He's coming for that world championship final. Wolf, he's coming. Beryl's coming.
He's coming. But in conclusion, right now, to kind of like link these two conversations together, I predict T1 will actually beat Dplus in that first round.
I totally agree with that take.
I think they beat Dplus.
Because here's the thing about Faker. It's not just his shot calling. He actually improves his teammates' mechanics just by being in the game. He has a passive aura where he's in the game, and then Zeus and KIA and Owner remember how to click buttons properly. It's a really weird power that he has. I've never really seen anything quite like it, because when he's not there, their hands are like crippled. It's like his crippled hand. If his crippled arm isn't in the game, everyone else's arm gets crippled. It's a very weird curse that T1 have going on right now. Not sure what's up with that.
Yeah, it's I don't know. When Faker dies, like that's the thing. Like we always joke, like Faker dies, but they get like a trade up because everyone rotates in. Like maybe when he dies, he's just like, all right, KIA, you move through this path, and he's just calling. He's like, all right, Zeus, I need you to flank from exactly this angle. Wait in the bush. Not yet. Like
I think he must actually just be yelling out keystrokes and they're hitting them. So he's like Q, QW.
Like, right click Y54 X. It's like yelling out coordinates.
It's the only explanation I have for it, Wolf. It's fucking weird.
Yeah, his return, like I think, really elevated the team's mental. In terms of like how well they were able to play and handle some of the tough spots in that Live Sandbox series. He looked like he was having a blast, to be totally honest, Monty, when he was playing Xerath. Like he just
it was
didn't
funny.
care.
He was laughing his ass off when the Jax kept like flanking him and like trying to kill him, because he didn't care. Like just as an aside, what the fuck is going on with Xerath's ultimate? It is the saddest looking ultimate of all time. It just looks like a drop of water just being spit up in the air. It doesn't look like it should do any damage. It's just like the animation is fucking terrible. Yeah. Anyway, but once he's done,
I think they should change it.
Once he's done like bukakeing the enemy team, he doesn't have any other purpose. There's the mental inventory. It's what it looks like, man. I don't know what to say. Looks like Xerath energy bukake. Anyway, look, all I'm gonna say is I don't know where that's shooting from on Xerath. Maybe his chest, but the angle's kind of weird. It could be coming from somewhere else.
so Xerath has like obviously they buffed him to where if you end up hitting those and chaining them together, you get additional damage, which is actually quite significant. But also,
but anyway, my point is that when he's done bukakeing, he doesn't really have anything left to do. Well, and so it doesn't matter if Jax kills him or not.
Bulldog has tried to play the Xerath and like failed, but he had some good team fights, and Faker also, because his team was really coordinated around his Xerath, like it's like he's firing from like another Summoner's Rift. Like he's so inaccessible during his ultimate that if your Jax is like gonna flank all the way around the team setup and get on top of him, then cool, your Jax wasn't there for the whole fight. Faker still did a majority of his damage, and then you lost the fight because you didn't have a top, and you didn't have a front line, and you didn't have any way to engage. So if like T1 are entrenched, it's like Heimerdinger in a different way, where like if they're set up for the Xerath, he's going to do a ton of damage, and it's hard to operate around that. And then after the ult is done, then you just send Faker in, and he blasts out all of his abilities like once or twice and sets up a stun, and like he dies. And that's, of course, assuming like he doesn't get blown up by Jax, like while the rest of the team is front to backing after Faker's damage is there. So I think it works. Faker played it well.
Also, he
It's
built
not
the
just an
right
ult
items.
button.
He built Leandries, which is something that Insanity refused to build in the game that he decided that he was going to lose with TSM against Dignitas. I know you probably didn't watch Game 5 of that series, but it was another Azir Xerath matchup. And if he had actually just built Leandries, I'm pretty confident that TSM wins
Did he
that
build
game.
Ludens or Rod of
He
Ages? What did he
he
build?
did build Ludens, which I think is
Oof.
just fucking terrible in the late game. I
That's
think
like a
it's just
solo
fucking
queue
terrible.
build. Like that's like a I'm gonna win. I'm gonna get him. I'm gonna blow that guy up from 5 miles away.
It was bad, man. It was bad. What can I say?
uh, so anyway, Faker looks happy. T1 looked better around him, and mentality on T1 trending upwards. Like everyone's happier. Everyone's getting back to their form. Dplus trending downwards, and where these two intersect is a Dplus that has problem shot calling and Showmaker struggling versus Faker. Is he like gonna destroy? Is he gonna actually get destroyed by Showmaker? No. Is he gonna destroy Showmaker? No. Like I think that matchup will go kind of even. It's not like Showmaker's not gonna get gapped like he did against Zeka. Is what I'm trying to say.
Maybe. I mean, you
But
seem confident about that. I'm not so sure.
maybe I don't predict that. I think it could happen, but I don't think it's likely. But at the same time, Showmaker's not making the same impact he used to, and the shot calling is weak. We're seeing indecisive calls or weird calls, like Canyon getting caught. Like you can blame Canyon for that, but also clearly the team is trying to do something else and like push over here and get vision over there, and then Canyon dies randomly in weird places. T1 are not indecisive at all. They will make aggressive calls when Faker's on the roster. They will be decisive. They will quickly punish you if you try to catch somebody in a side lane, but you didn't bring enough people, you don't have the proper vision to set it up, or if you're Kana and you're trying to push out, but Canyon isn't shadowing you because he's following Showmaker around to try to give him money, and then boom, Kana dies in the side, you lose the objective, you lose the Baron. T1 are super decisive, and as long as they don't mess up lane, or like catastrophically tilt for some reason, or like Faker has a bad game because his hands are hurting. I just think it's even though like T1 had such a rough season even before Faker left, the current form, like at the end of the season, the trends are like T1 up, Dplus down. I think it's almost ridiculous to expect that Dplus would beat T1 right now, based on what we've seen in the last 2 weeks. I just don't see it.
Well, Wolf, I agree with you. And our match of the week here on Last Free Nation is, in fact, T1 versus Dplus KIA. Whoa! So that means on Esports Bet, if you place a prediction, your first prediction on this match, you can get 10% additional profit if you get it right. So that's up to $100 USDT. So 10% up to 100 USDT, or its equivalent in esports coin, which is the renamed DJT, which is free, or its equivalent in another cryptocurrency. And those odds right now are 1.577 for T1 and 2.431 for Dplus. So it feels like one of those very few times where you can get a good, good odds, almost 1.6 on T1, which is rare that you get good odds on T1 because of their fan base. And I agree with you. I think they're a pretty heavy favorite going into this match with Faker back.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will just pile on T1's struggles and not actually pay attention and think that that just automatically means T1 will lose. There's a reason why HLE picked DRX and not T1. So yeah, I expect that series. I the only way I see Dplus winning is if they like stomp 3-0 and T1 like fall apart and the shot calling is off and it's like what was happening before Faker's injury. Like I don't think that's impossible, but there's no world in which I can predict that to happen. I don't think it's impossible. Like there is a weird world where Dplus upset and T1, are having a really off day, and like KIA, KIA had those really weird games earlier this season where he was like alone top on Renata for there's still not explained and weird stuff like that. If something like that happens after Dplus like win a dominant game one, then yeah, maybe Dplus could 3-0 or something like that. And it would be
I also just get worried about Dplus's drafts, Wolf. Like that game 2 against HLE where they decided to give HLE on red side Maokai, Jace, Xayah, Rel, and Renekton. And then what they picked into it was Vi, Jax, Annie, Varus, Alistair. There is no universe. Like, first off, you can't give the combo of Maokai, Jace, and Xayah to any good team right now. That is crazy poke damage. It is crazy peel. And how do you ever, between Rel, Maokai, and Renekton, how do you ever get onto the back line unless Hanwha makes a positional mistake, which they did, to be fair. I mean, Def did get a quadra kill in that game, but it requires such, kind of epic mispositioning from the team that's running that composition, because even if you have Annie, Jax, and Vi and Alistair, you can't get onto the back line. There's too much
not
peel.
reliable. Yeah, it's not reliable.
So
it's not.
So, like, I'm concerned that Dplus ended up with a blue side draft that looked like that, and the champions that they were giving up to HLE was a little bit weird. It was a little bit weird to me. And also, factually, like, Maokai is an incredibly important champion in this meta, and Canyon is fucking terrible at Maokai. Like, I don't know. I don't know how to, like, say this any other way. He wastes ult a lot of the time before critical team fights, or he wastes ults. Like, he was like trying to turn around a kill in top lane that was already basically done. And then he doesn't have ults for the next several minutes. It's a long cooldown early on. And also he just like let them know where he was, which then, led to aggression cross map from HLE. So it's really puzzling, this guy's like Maokai usage. He has a 33, he's 1-2 this season on this champion, but his Vi and his Maokai have looked really bad so far.
Yeah.
The champions that he's looked good on, I think he's looked good on, obviously, the Lee Sin. He's 100% win rate on this season. He's looked good. His Nico games have been amazing, like really amazing. That's been really solid. His Ivern games have been pretty good. But for whatever reason, this team just can't play Vi, Sejuani, and Maokai. And that is a problem. That is a big problem in this meta, that they can't play any of these three champions.
It's wild, like, that he can't. Like,
he can't play engaged champs.
Yeah,
like he can't play really engaged champs. Like, it's very strange. He can't play engaged champs.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, he can play Viego, like he can play a team fight champ, like he can do that stuff, but like it's weird. Like, I remember Canyon's Xin Zhao as well was also incredible. Like, it's not meta, it's not relevant anymore, but like, it's weird when you consider the skill set he has on other champions that he can't make it work on these. And like, his Maokai was always a little bit sus. In Worlds, like, there were some questions around it there as well.
Dude, I just had whiplash watching games this last week, Wolf, because I was watching Tarzan's glorious Maokai in the LPL finals, and that guy's just, I think he's the best Maokai player in the world. And then I come back and I have to watch like Canyon's Maokai. It's just fucking painful, man. He's just terrible at this champion. I don't know. I don't know.
It's weird. Like, Canyon, he has such high highs on specific champions, and usually, weirdly enough, the more niche champions this season. But niche champions aren't going to get you over the line when it comes to like really top teams. A lot of the times we saw Canyon pick up POG is like he's gutter stomping like Nongshim or something in round one, and you're like, oh, okay, like you got him. But like, he's been really tested, I think, in these really important matchups, because their round two is a little bit more backloaded in terms of the strength of schedule, and that's where the struggles are coming through. And I also just really, 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 really hope they play Kellen. Like, we talked about it a little bit already, but please, like, Guma and Keria will absolutely obliterate you. That their laning has not been a problem this season. I think they will absolutely obliterate you if you play Bible. I think he is just not going to cut it against that duo. You might be able to pull that off against, who maybe against Barrel. Like, I'm looking at the playoff AD carry support duos. Like, yeah, maybe Bible could go toe to toe with Barrel, because Bible is basically budget Barrel in every way, in terms of his engages, his laning, and his shot calling prowess. Like, he's budget Barrel. Maybe you could go toe to toe against Poduk and Barrel, but I don't think so against anybody else in this tournament. You're not going to do it against Viper in Life. You're not going to do it against Guma Carry. You're definitely not going to do it against Pays or Aiming and Delight and Lehens, of course, respectively. So I think we can put T1 into round 2. Like I'm feeling pretty confident about that.
So Wolf, you're from the South, right? You're from the
Yes.
South. If Bible's played, do you think that Keria and Gumayushi will ever be able to go to the South based on what they're going to do to the Bible? Do you think they'll be welcome in Georgia?
Depends on which county. But I also feel like Georgia sports fans would 100% be T1 fans also, though. 100% be T1 sports fans. Like the T1 colors are basically like the UGA colors as well.
um, Okay. Well,
All right.
I agree with you. That's why I picked the match of the week for Last Free Nation to be the T1 Dplus. There's good odds right now. Now the odds probably will go down by the time that I get around to placing my prediction on this match. But it's a good time. Honestly, what's cool about our match of the week, if you guys watch the Monte and Wolf show, because this is the first show we announced it on, the odds are often better at this time of the week. And like once they get closer to the match, the odds kind of normalize a little bit. So if you listen here and you get in now, you can get in early with good odds usually.
Oh yeah, like get in there before people find out. Before people
Before people
realize, before the
realize.
word gets out that like, wait a minute.
And besides, when they announced that that Bible's going to be playing in the match, it'll get even worse. So,
HLE versus DRX. Do we even want to entertain the possibility that DRX?
I'm sorry.
Remember last time we
Barrel's
didn't.
inevitable destiny of making his 4th consecutive World Finals, Wolf. He will not be denied. He will not be denied. We're in for the KT DRX World Finals.
But he's already got Worlds qualifiers, so even if they drop out 0-3 here, he could still make the run.
Ooh, good point. I had not considered that.
So like last time we did this where we were talking about the Worlds qualifiers, we like legit just were like, all right, so we're not going to talk about DRX, right? We're not going to talk about DRX, so then we just moved on.
He's not. Is he guaranteed to be in the qualifiers?
As far as I know, yeah, because the summer.
Oh yeah, 6th place. He got 10 points.
The summer points are higher, so he
Right,
got.
they're worth more. So because Liv
points.
Sandbox didn't make it, yeah, you're actually right. They are guaranteed. Yeah. That's crazy.
So they will play in the Worlds qualifier no matter what, and may get an additional bonus like going into that bracket if they or gauntlet if they end up winning like more. But I don't see that happening. I look at the Hanwha versus DRX matchup and. Maybe Grizzly got a little bit gapped by Peanut. Don't know if that's going to happen up against Rocco slash Chuhan. I don't know if that's going to happen here. Also, Rascal at his peak, I would have been worried about Kingen. Rascal is not living in his peak timeline right now. Nor is Fate against Zeka, who is, in my mind right now, like currently, arguably the second best mid laner. Like he and Chovy have different strengths, but in terms of laning, Fate's weak in lane, Zeka's strong in lane. Zeka's making big impacts on team fights. I think I would say the same about Fate versus Chovy. I'd be like, well, that's doomed also. But he's facing off against Zeka first, and bottom lane, I just don't see it going well for my man Barrel. I just don't see that. I don't see that being a strong point. It's like a tier list diff. Like Dplus and T1, you could talk about more subtle things as we already have, but for this one, it's just like, I mean, Han was just way better than DRX, like in every way. Like there's no
I would
like
have said the same thing about DRX last year. And yet they beat KT in the regional qualifier, and I was very sad. And then they won Worlds, which I still can't believe happened. So, and now that the skins are released, it's even more surreal, Wolf. Because now I have to look at Kingen playing his fucking Aatrox skin in a game.
And then like not playing Aatrox well, wearing the skin. So I you're with me at 3-0 Hanwha. We can move on to talking about who these team or who KT would select. Because this conversation is somewhat interesting, but
I think they picked T1.
I think they picked T1, and I think that the main reason for me is mid lane, because I think stylistically, Faker versus BDD favors BDD, and BDD versus Zeka. It's not like BDD is going to necessarily lose to Zeka, but I think the things that Zeka does well more competes with what BDD does well than what Faker could offer versus BDD in that matchup. I think if I'm KT, I'm a little bit concerned about facing Zeka. And also, Hanwha's the only team that really challenged KT this entire season, besides Gen.G with the Shiv incident and stuff like that earlier on in the season. So I'm kind of feeling like as KT, you just don't want to face Hanwha at any cost. And the way this bracket works, they may not for the entire tournament, but it is it's just pretty elementary to pick T1 here and just destroy them again. I think is what the idea is for KT.
Yeah. I do tend to agree with that. My one thing that I will say is that I think Gen.G did a very good job of showing how to beat Hanwha in their series. Because basically they punished the Wukong pick with Maokai really hard in game 1, and Peanut did an excellent job of counter jungling against Grizzly and setting him super far behind. And then game 2, they abused Grizzly's kind of cross map pathing to set up what was a very obvious dive on the bottom side, and Grizzly wasn't there, and setting Viper really far behind, which is a very good way to beat Hanwha. So I think, there Grizzly was kind of exposed in that series for being a conflict avoidant jungler in the early games. And because they had pressure a lot of the time from their lanes, they were able to play off of that and invade really effectively or tower dive really effectively. So KT could mimic that strategy. And I think that, Hanwha probably is going to struggle potentially a little bit more versus some of the top teams, once they blow past DRX.
Yeah. I think there's a world in which rather T1, if they look really good, like if they look back in form, also that you might just react to that current form and avoid them because of it.
Yeah.
But again, we won't know that until we watch the games. So it's hard for me to just say like, oh yeah, I think that's what will happen. Like I would rather predict reasonably that it'll be KT, T1, and Gen.G Hanwha. And then my expectation is actually both of the teams sitting around to kind of destroy their opponents. Like I have called this season a few times like the tier list season for a reason, because there are quite large gaps between these sets of teams where it seems hard to fathom upsets. Like Gen.G versus Hanwha, we just watched that very recently. It wasn't close, like not even slightly, as we were just talking about.
I think it's a bad matchup because Peanut is a very good player at outsmarting rookies, right?
He has tons of experience. He's been on so many teams. He knows how to get into people's heads.
Yeah, Peanut gets wrecked by Canyon. He doesn't really get wrecked by other junglers. And especially because he is so good about creating game plans and playing around pressure and invading. It's very, very hard to outpath him if you are a newer jungler. So I think the experience diff is like really huge in that case.
Yeah. So KT versus Gen.G will probably, like, the expectations will probably get it twice, right? We'll get it in that third round, and then Gen.G will win the losers match, probably against Hanwha, and then it'll be a Gen.G KT rematch. Like that's, I think, the expectation for what this tournament is going to look like. But we've watched enough KT over the years, and with this roster as well. Remember their losers finals in spring, where they actually could have beaten Gen.G, and they were winning that Ezreal game, and then Aiming and crew decided that maybe they didn't want to go to the finals, and they messed up that win con and put the Ezreal into melee range of everybody. It was not great. I could see a world where KT wins round 3 against Gen.G, even if it's one side, like 3-0, but then actually chokes in the finals for some reason.
Possible.
Like I could actually see that happening, just because Gen.G have so much recent experience with finals. And outside of Pays, obviously have played in so many really critical best of fives.
They came in as an underdog in spring and still won. So they've got the mental fortitude for sure.
I think if KT is not tested at all, I'd almost just be ready to predict that they won't win the finals, because if KT just kind of stomps T1 and then beats Gen.G in that third round and then sits in the finals while Gen.G makes that run against multiple different types of opponents and comes back up, I feel like KT, based on what we've seen from them as well recently, where they're kind of showboating a little bit, having too much fun, like if they don't actually face any sort of hardship, then I can't say like I would predict that they'll lose, because that's just a dumb thing to say, in that why would I just assume that KT won't actually prepare properly? But I could see a world in which they don't prepare properly, aren't tested, have the wrong read going into the finals, Gen.G go through the lower bracket, learn a lot on their way, and then actually come out stronger and then upset the finals again. This is, I think, a much closer, like obviously first versus second type of scenario where we're talking about favorites here than what we saw last season. Like last time, T1 were clear favorites, and Gen.G's win was a pretty large upset. This time, I feel like it's not the same thing. Like if Gen.G wins against KT even in round 3, we won't say it was a massive upset. I think it may be a small upset, but these teams are very close right now in their current skill level, even though KT had a dominant performance in that round 2 matchup.
Yeah. I think it was an unusual off day for Gen.G, which is what we said earlier. I mean, I don't think we're going to see it be totally one-sided every time these teams play.
I think that, like, a lot of people see it differently, especially T1 haters, but the win that Gen.G took in spring, I really feel was Gen.G absolutely overperforming and really showing up. A lot of people look at it like T1 choked and had a really bad day. I don't think T1 played at their absolute best, and I don't think they played their absolute best at MSI either. But I think Doran really showed up in that series, in that finals, and obviously Pays showcased like why he is a really high class talent. I think Doran was robbed of MVP, but whatever. Pays still played really well, and I want to say that Gen.G could do it again. But we'll have to wait and see. As it's a long playoffs. There's a lot going on, and it is going to be grueling. I would love to see an upset. I'd love to see Hanwha come in and actually shake things up and go to the winners finals or something like that. That would be really fun. But it's a tier list season. I just don't see it happening. The pieces are set, like we know where things are supposed to go. I feel.
So, how's the Pays MVP looking after the loss to Brion there, Wolf?
So
is it dead? Is it dead?
It seems. I mean, as far as I could tell, it seems pretty dead.
Yes!
Although no one has shared with me who they have voted for. I mean, obviously I know who everyone voted for on Global, and actually the votes or the results should be coming out soon, if not already. While we were doing this show, I heard they were coming out this morning, but they should be out soon, and you'll be able to see everyone's votes publicly. I voted for, actually, ultimately, I decided to vote for BDD for MVP.
Oh no! Fuck you!
I thought about it a lot, and I think BDD overall more valuable than Keen this season. I think Keen in round 1 was no question, but in round 2, I think BDD's performance across both rounds was better. I voted for BDD. But Keen was easily number 1 top. No one you have to put like top, then second, and then third. I thought about for Keen's sake, just putting Keen and then leaving second blank and then putting third.
Oh
I
my
didn't
God.
do that, but
I can't believe you did me like that.
I knew you were going to be really upset, and I was hoping I could get through this
I'm
whole
not that
episode without
upset.
telling you, so you could.
I think BDD is a strong candidate as well. I just couldn't live in a reality where Pays won MVP. I'm sorry. That would
Some
be
people didn't put Pays in their top 3, actually. Some people put Deft over him. Deft and Viper.
Did anybody put Keen as number 1? Who's the real hero here?
I think on the global side, we all did BDD. I'm trying to think. Maybe somebody did Peanut.
Okay.
It might have been all BDD though.
It's not unreasonable.
And yeah, there weren't really any big surprises, although AD carry was very contentious in terms of who people were voting for first. I went with aiming actually in the end, but it was really tough because we have such a stacked AD carry pool. Yeah. And everyone was trying, we had a discussion. We usually discuss with our votes before like we send them in just to make sure nobody makes a really dumb decision. And we're like, that doesn't make any sense. Why are you doing that? Like, but everyone was kind of trying to figure out if Deft could fit into their 80 carry top 3, and some people did, some people didn't. But
I think it's reasonable to have him there.
yeah,
Depends on what you
for sure.
prioritize.
Yeah. Otherwise, I was the only like Lehens believer for number 1 for support. Everyone
Everybody
else was
said Delight.
Delight. Yeah. And everyone was like saying I was crazy for it, so I had to really like get the whiteboard out and draw the lines to actually explain like why I think Lehens is better. But
yeah, I think they're both solid choices.
I wouldn't be shocked, like on the Korean side, based on what they valued for OPGG Player of the Week votes, where every week we look at their like scores and then we vote. But you don't, even if the score is like horrible for a player, you could still vote for them. And the number of votes, like the score actually breaks the tie. The OPGG score breaks the tie, but it's basically weekly MVP. We do that every week. And based on the Korean votes, I wouldn't be shocked if like a lot of them vote for Lehens. And because he is right now like on the Korean side, I think they really are super high on him more than Delight. I think the Western viewpoint is that like Delight is better, but the Korean side seems to really favor Lehens. I don't know what they're gonna do. For me, like BDD pretty easy choice. Right after rethinking it quite a bit. Sorry, Monty.
No, it's fine. I'm not actually that mad. I would be mad if Pace won. But I do
don't
think
that's
that
going to happen
BDD
anymore.
has had an excellent season, so I'm not super salty about that.
Yeah, Pace is going to win Rookie of the Year. You can have that one.
He deserves it. He absolutely deserves it. I'm not a Pace hater, guys. I just think that Pace was not the MVP player, the MVP of this league, which is a totally reasonable position to have.
Yeah.
I think Pace is an amazing rookie, really amazing. I look forward to hopefully a long career of Pace, where he continues to improve and eventually can probably win MVP at some point.
Is his contract also expiring at the end of this year? I think it is, which is
I
weird.
believe it is.
I'm checking actually just to make sure. No, actually, he's 2024.
Okay, so Gen.G's got.
So we got him on Gen.G for at least another year. So he's not leaving Korea.
He's the only one. I don't think he will have this only team. One on Gen.G. He's the only one on Gen.G who's
he will not have this team next year. The only 2 players I feel like for sure stay on Gen.G, just in my opinion, are obviously Pays and Doran. I think will end up staying. I think the org really values him, and I don't think he's necessarily.
I think they really value Peanut as well. I think they really value Peanut as well.
Yeah, I just don't know if Peanut values staying with this team if it breaks up and they lose Chovy. Or if he values money. So, like, I don't know if Peanut well enough to know what he wants to do in this situation, but they may try to keep him because he is super valuable, and I know what the Gen.G staff thinks of Doran, and they really think he's, like, a perfect fit for the team, and they really like having him, so we'll see, but that team is otherwise not going to stay together, and Pays will be tested with a different roster, which will be fun to see, because obviously, since joining the LCK, he's only played with this one, and it is his rookie season, but if he has a weaker team to play with, maybe he shines more, or maybe he struggles. That'll really be quite interesting to follow for next year.
All right. Well, any final thoughts here, Wolf? We do have a variety of matches that are happening this week. Quite a few. Holy moly! There's actually 5 best of 5s that are happening this week in the LCK. Starting on you actually start on Tuesday this week.
Yeah, and also today we have challengers playoffs. Both the first 2 series. I'll be casting the first one. So as soon as the show ends, I'm going to be going over and getting a little bit of breakfast, a quick breakfast. I'm just going straight over to the studio. So that'll be starting in like 3 hours if you're watching live. Just watch challengers, watch playoffs, and shout outs to us. We were always right in believing KT in the regular season. They got first place. Thanks Giga Chad's bro, who were also on our side. They knew that KT was destined for first place. And even though they didn't need to win 2-0 for KT to get it, they were clearly aligned with us. While bro disappointed us at the end of the season and didn't get playoffs, even though they were by far the best team in contention for playoffs at their best. That's one last thing I'll say about bro. At bro's best, easily the 6th best team going to that spot. Like, easily. Too bad they didn't play the best until it was time to make sure KT got first place. Thanks, bro.
The prophecy of KT was real. It was Brover, and then they came out and struck down Gen.G to ensure that the KT prophecy came true. We told you it was a prophecy, guys. If you don't believe it, look at what happened with Brion Gen.G. You didn't expect that to happen, did you?
Do you think the prophecy says that KT wins the whole thing, Monty?
Yes, of course.
All right, me too.
All right. By the way, are there 2 matches on Friday? Are there 2 best of 5s on Friday? Or is there one on Sunday? Which match is on Sunday?
Sunday. Wait.
I might be being trolled by fandom.
Yeah, I think it's a time zone weird thing for you. There's a
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah,
it is. It's there's only one match. You scared me. I was like, I don't think there's 2 matches.
So there's actually 6 best of 5s this week. That is fucking crazy.
Yeah. And then we're gonna have plus challengers best of 5s, and then you're gonna have
casual
the
possible 30 hours of Korean League of Legends.
Yeah. We're gonna have Daejeon as well. The losers finals into the finals, so that'll be really exciting. If Viper gets into that top 3 spot, he's going to his hometown. So we'll see if he can make it happen.
Sounds good. All right, guys. Well, we'll have 6 best of 5s to talk about next week, apparently, on the show. So really packed week for the LCK, and we'll see you next time.